Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Empower Missouri's 2026 Legislative Preview. My name is Lucas Caldwell McMillan, and I am Chief of Policy Staff here at Empower Missouri. And I'm really glad you decided to spend some time with us previewing the upcoming legislative session. Our agenda for today, we'll do a quick meet the policy team slide and then give a brief overview of the upcoming session and talk about some issues that don't fall under our core areas. Then we're going to dig into those core areas: food security, affordable housing, and last but not least, community justice. And then we'll talk about some opportunities to join us in advocating for smart policies that make a stronger Missouri in 2026, and some ways you can join us both virtually and in person. So first, it is my pleasure to be Chief of Policy Staff with this great group of policy managers. We're first going to hear from Christine Woody and Amanda Berry, the food security policy managers. I'll be covering the affordable housing slides, but wanted to make sure and introduce V. Sanchez, our longtime stellar affordable housing policy manager, and the newest member of our policy team, Erica Robbins. She will be in the chat, so you see her name as she shares links throughout the presentation. She's been with us for about a month and has been great. Then Rico will be rounding us out, Rico White, covering the community justice issues, subbing in for her colleague, Gwen Smith-Moore. So, if you do have questions, always happy to reach out and learn about new collaborations, new opportunities. Please reach out to us, me or any of the policy managers, happy to talk more about anything we discussed today. All right, let's jump in. The 2026 session is really going to be right upon us. I think it's about 3 weeks, 3 weeks from tomorrow. It'll start on January 7th. There'll be some well-deserved breaks in between, and then it'll end on May 15th. And that will be our regular legislative session here in Missouri for those months. As far as what to expect for the next session, some of the key topics, first on a little bit of a procedural question, which is how is the fallout from some of the special session activities? So if you recall, there was a special session just now a few months ago where the gerrymandered map, congressional map was passed, as well as restrictions on citizens' rights to use initiative petition to pass new laws. Both of those were done with some controversy, and Empower Missouri opposed both of those. We will all have an opportunity to vote on that initiative petition change because it requires a change to the Constitution. And both that and the end of the 2025 regular session involved using a somewhat controversial procedural maneuver in the Missouri Senate called previous question. Sort of ends debate. It really is not typically used in regular session, but it was used at the end of last regular session. And so there are a lot of questions about how that's going to impact the operations of the Senate and how the Dem leaders will respond to sort of this unusual procedural hurdle. So that's something we're going to keep our eye on during this next session. A real substantive topic that Empower Missouri and others will be working on is opposing this plan to replace the state income tax. So Governor Kehoe announced that he plans to eliminate the state income tax and replace it with something. We'll learn more details when the governor's State of the State address happens on January 13th. And until then, just a couple of things to highlight, and I'll have Erica add a couple of these documents from the Missouri Budget Project in the chat. But some things we know from the Missouri Budget Project about the state income tax is that it is our main source of general revenue for the state. So it funds roads and schools. It's around 60% of all general revenue comes from the state income tax. So to replace it or get rid of it leaves a super large hole for all of these key services and programs. The other thing we know is that through the work of the Budget Project, that replacing the state income tax will likely involve a sales tax, which means replacing it with a regressive tax will be a tax increase for the majority of Missourians. So in order to make up that revenue, what it'll involve is a lot less money for the upper income brackets, for the wealthiest members of our state, where the majority of Missourians will end up paying more in taxes if it's replaced with some of these regressive items. And as an anti-poverty organization, it really also is hit the hardest on the lowest income bracket. So working class folks, low income folks getting by will see a large increase in the percent of their income going toward taxes. They'll have less take home pay. So it's a really big issue both for the programs we support that lift people up and also for changing it with regressive taxes, which will impact those same folks in Missouri. So more to come on that. That will be a big hot topic for Empower Missouri, our colleagues and supporters, as well as the Missouri legislature this next upcoming session. Another issue that's, I think, been in the news and has been certainly a hot topic in previous sessions is around education funding. There's been changes to how tax dollars go to support private schools, as well as some talk about how those the public education funding formulas might be changed. So we expect that to be take up a lot of bandwidth this next session. All of that is in the context of that last item there, which is that because of the funds that had been around for the past few budget years from COVID dollars, those are largely been used up. And so we're entering a time of a much smaller pot of money to fund state programs. And so that will be the background for a lot of discussions as well in the 2026 session. So that was a quick overview of some other topics. Now let's dig into one of our first core issue areas, which is food security. And I'll turn it over to Amanda Berry.
All right, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Berry, Food Security Policy Manager, and I'm going to begin by sharing what policy priority issues our team's going to be focused on during the upcoming session. Next slide, please. We essentially have four main areas of focus: school meal expansion, food as medicine, SNAP ban opt-out, and SNAP in the budget. Next slide, please. We're going to start off with school meal expansion and just a little background. We have over 900,000 kids attending Missouri schools, and all of them need to eat while they're there. Many schools participate in the National Free and Reduced Price School Breakfast and Lunch programs. These programs provide free school meals to students that live in households at or below 130% of the federal poverty level, and then reduced price school meals for kids living in households between 131% and up to 185% of the federal poverty level. Both of these programs are really excellent resources to help ensure that kids are able to receive meals while they're at school. However, many kids are still unable to afford meals. Several pieces of legislation have already been pre-filed. The top three under the heading Universal would make meals free to all kids regardless of income. And this is most certainly our ultimate goal. We will be supporting those, testifying in support, trying to get people on our network to join us in supporting them. But we also recognize that Missouri could be facing a budget crisis, and these bills may be difficult to pass. So we're going to throw all of our weight behind the reduced price bill filed by Representative Murray, and that eliminates the reduced price copay for school lunches. Over 60,000 kids are enrolled in the reduced price school meal program, but the cost of those copays have been identified as one of the biggest barriers preventing kids from actually receiving a meal. Passage of this bill would help ensure that all of the kids can have lunch during the school day that are enrolled in that program. And I'm also going to continue working with legislators to see if we can get more bills filed to eliminate the copay, and that would include breakfast. We're also going to be supporting House Bill 2341, filed by Representative Prouty, which states that breakfast shall be offered after the bell in schools that have over 70% of kids enrolled in the free or reduced price school meal programs. And that's just a really cost-effective way to help ensure more kids are able to eat. Next slide, please. So there's been quite a buzz. Maybe you have heard about this at the national or state level surrounding the food is medicine movement. And there's quite a bit of nuance, and I really do enjoy getting into the weeds on it, but now is not the time. So, what's helpful to know is that Food as Medicine and Food is Medicine are both programs geared to reduce chronic diet-related illnesses and disease through nutrition education and by increasing access to healthy foods. Missouri currently has two pre-filed bills, and both of them create the Food is Medicine Act. The bill language directs the Department of Social Services to submit an 1115 waiver to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services for a Food is Medicine program. And the program is designed to improve health outcomes for Medicaid participants with nutrition-related chronic diseases through nutrition services and to reduce the need for medical care for those participants. So if you're kind of wondering like what that would really look like in practice, it's programs such as medically tailored meals, maybe you've heard of produce prescription boxes, and then also having Medicaid covering the cost of visits to nutritionists and physicians to create health improvement plans through nutrition. That wraps up what I'm presenting, and now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Christine Woody, to discuss the remaining food security policy priorities.
Thanks, Amanda. The first one I want to talk about is something that Empower Missouri has been working on for a very long time, over a decade. This is a bill that we have had filed for many, many years. It goes back to, on the federal level, some of the SNAP laws and SNAP language that are on the books on the federal level, where back in the 90s, they passed a law that stated if you have a felony drug conviction on your record, you will be banned from accessing the SNAP program for the rest of your life. This is a lifetime ban, and that ban is only for those who have a conviction related to drug felonies. And when they passed those laws back in the 90s, they put a caveat in there that said states can decide to opt out of that bill or that law language if they chose to do so. As you can see on this map, quite a few states have passed state laws that have opted them out of this lifetime ban. You can see on the map also that Missouri has something called a modified ban. So back in 2014, Empower Missouri worked to pass a bill that modified that ban, but it was very complicated. It had lots of nuances. And from a lot of discussions with some of my direct service partners, we realized that if you have a drug felony in the state of Missouri, it is still next to impossible to access the SNAP program, even if there is a small sliver of a chance to make that happen with the language of the law. So since 2014, we have been trying to get a bill passed that would completely opt Missouri out of following that provision. Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman has refiled her bill that would opt Missouri out of it. It's Senate Bill 1401. We are still waiting to see if our sponsor from last year, Representative Chad Perkins, will refile his bill on the House side. He has not done so yet. But we are in conversation with his office to get that bill filed on the House side as well. So we will continue to work on this. We have made headway over the last few years, getting much closer to this. Many times working very closely with our Community Justice Coalition and other kind of justice-minded organizations to really see the connection between this and justice issues that we are working on. So we will continue to work on this as the next coming months ahead. And finally, I think one of the biggest things our coalition is going to be working on is regarding our state budget and the funding for the SNAP program. As I'm sure all of you are well aware, this summer, the Reconciliation Bill, otherwise known as the Big Beautiful Bill Act, was passed and signed into law on the 4th of July. And in that language, there were multiple changes to the SNAP program that will be coming down the pike. Two that will negatively impact the Missouri state budget. And one of those specifically is what we are going to be truly focused on for this upcoming legislation. It has the significant impact and is the most immediate impact on our budget. If you look at this next slide, this goes into a little bit more detail about that specific first negative impact change that's going to take place. So currently, the way that the administrative costs of SNAP work is that it's split 50% federal government, 50% state government. The new language of the new law states that that shift is going to, or that cost is going to shift more heavily to the states. So it's going to move to a 75% share being paid for by the states and only 25% share being paid for by the federal government. And as you can see on that slide, that means there needs to be an additional $29 million in state funds that would run the SNAP program at a status quo level. It would not increase any funding, but this would only to run it in the exact same way that it was run before. So we need additional $29 million in the Department of Social Services budget just to continue the SNAP program as it is. The way that the budget works is that the departments all put forth their budget. It then goes to the governor's office, who puts forth his budget. It then moves through the legislative process, where it then ultimately is passed by the legislature and then hopefully signed by the governor. The Department of Social Services has put out their budget request for the upcoming fiscal year, and that $29 million is included, which is the great first step. But we are going to spend lots of time these next couple months talking to all of the legislature to impart on them the importance of SNAP and the importance of funding SNAP and investing in this program. So a lot of our time is going to be talking about the budget and ensuring that this money stays in the budget as it passes through the legislative process. The next one I'm not going to go into, but that's looking towards the next session, where it really is affecting the benefit costs. So currently, states do not pay any dollar amount for the benefits that come through the SNAP program, but that will be changing in fiscal year 28, which will have to happen next legislative session. And that amount could cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So once we get through this first hurdle, that's going to come down the pike for next session as well. And finally, on this slide, we just have a few other things that we're following, and we'll continue to kind of work on in the background as it moves through the legislative session. We're not going to go too deeply into this, but these are just some topics of bills that have already been pre-filed, and we kind of will follow along and testify and work on them as they move through the legislative session. Increasing the amount of money in the donated food or the food pantry tax credit, working on eliminating the sales taxes for groceries at the state level, and then establishing a restaurant meals program within the SNAP program on the state level as well. And we will deeper into each one of these in our Food Security Coalition. So if you are really kind of piqued by any of the things that we've been talking about here in the last couple slides, we would love for you to join the Food Security Coalition. I know we'll put some links into the chat about how to join the coalition and when these coalition calls will starting up here in 2026.
Great, thanks, Christine. All right, next up, me again. I am covering some of our housing priorities for the 2026 session. We'll start with a relatively new bill from Senator Nicola, SB 920. This restricts the purchase of additional residential properties when a business or investment entity either already owns 50 single-family homes or 100 residential units. And so purchasing, if you're that investor, purchasing that 51st single-family home would come with additional penalties and is prohibited under this new bill. I think a couple of reasons why we're excited to see these sorts of bills. It is a growing, I think, recognition by the Missouri legislature that affordable housing and the housing crisis is real, and we need to come up with solutions at the state level to help it. Obviously, this is just one aspect of what's driving affordability issues in our state. But I will say that this stat that 1 out of 3 houses that were sold to investors, single family homes, is quite astonishing. The other data point for the housing crisis I'll mention is that they just released data that shows that the average age for a first-time home buyer has crept up to 40 years old. And so it just shows that at least home ownership, in addition to other affordability issues, is really impacting where people can live, where they can work, all of those things. And so I think there's a growing recognition for that. This bill includes pretty significant penalties for doing this, and empowers the Missouri Attorney General to seek those penalties when it's violated. So it does have some teeth to it as well. And so we'll be following this. There are some other bills that go into corporate ownership. There's also some foreign ownership bills, but this is the one that's really focused on residential properties the most. The other issue that we're tracking, there's not been a bill filed, but we continue to support through our Missouri Housing Trust Fund campaign, increased funding for the Missouri Housing Trust Fund. It is a state level source that provides lots of different affordable housing interventions, including rental assistance, new construction and rehab of properties for low-income residents. It's not funded through taxes, which is another great portion of it. To increase funding wouldn't require a tax increase. It's just funded through a $3 fee when folks file deeds or other real estate documents with the recorder office. $3 of the fee that is paid goes to the Missouri Housing Trust Fund. And that amount, $3, hasn't changed since the Missouri Housing Trust Fund was first introduced in 1994. And so we're talking about the 2026 legislative session. So I'll say that's 32 years ago. There has not been any increase to funding to the Missouri Housing Trust Fund. As a result, it's really, really inadequate for the housing crisis I mentioned earlier, and particularly for low-income residents in Missouri, which is the focus of the trust fund. It's also based on real estate activity, so both it hasn't increased in the amount, but there are less real estate documents being filed because of interest rates, other macroeconomic conditions means there's less real estate transactions overall, which means that it's both being lower because the amount's not been adjusted for inflation and stayed the same since 1994, and also because real estate activity has gone down. And so as a result, there's been no funding for construction since 2023. And it's also been a couple of years since the rehabilitation of properties has been funded anywhere in the state through the Missouri Housing Trust Fund. About of the requests that get made from developers and nonprofits for funding for the Missouri Housing Trust Fund, 75% of them are denied because of lack of funding. And so, not only has the housing crisis, increased in the last few years, but the response and the funding available in the Missouri Housing Trust Fund has not kept up. And so it means that we, in some ways, are digging ourselves a bigger hole without some of the long-term fixes of new construction earmarked for low-income and moderate-income families through the Housing Trust Fund, and rehabbing properties for those same families means that we just do not have the state resources to respond and provide the affordable housing that's needed in our state. So we're hopeful that we can get some movement from the legislature and continue to educate the public about this state level source of housing. When I've done presentations throughout the state on this, almost inevitably there's someone who just doesn't believe that there's any fund available at the state level for affordable housing. When there is one, we just need to make sure it's adjusted because it hasn't been changed since 1994. So we'll be watching that issue and other affordable housing issues. As far as other bills that we're taking a look at, there's been a growing number of bills filed around workforce housing and workforce housing funding. I mentioned that the housing crisis means that people are having difficulty choosing where they live. Obviously, businesses and our economy relies on workers being able to be where jobs are and being able to afford housing where jobs are. And so these bills, including House Bill 1776, focus on providing funding for exactly that, and grant funds based on criteria that include sort of workforce needs of the individual region or area that's applying for the housing fund. So there are a couple of other bills related to that rural workforce housing. This one is a rural workforce housing investment fund. So we'll be tracking that during the legislative session. Representative Bosley also filed this House Bill 1954, which increases protections and rights for tenants who have a landlord that failed to fix a really unsafe or unhealthy condition. And so it adds provisions that allow tenants to enforce their right to get conditions that are unsafe or causing serious health hazards to the tenant or their kids, and provides a little bit more protection and consequences to landlords when they fail to remedy that condition. Senate Bill 1044 involves tax credit for homeless service providers. So we're supporting that work by Senator Washington to provide a little bit more support for folks who are dealing really at the tail end of the housing crisis, those who are experiencing homelessness due to lack of housing and our lack of affordable housing. Representative Murray filed a Bill of Rights for the unhoused. This has a series of protections for people who are experiencing homelessness, including protections of their right to vote, and so strengthening their protections of the right to vote. They're also their right to be free from discrimination from local and state government agencies. And so we'll be following that bill as well. It creates a host of other rights too, and has some real tenant protections built into it. I really thought the right to vote was an important aspect to protect for those experiencing homelessness. And lastly, Representative Crossley filed this bill about positive credit reporting by landlords. And so I think many folks are aware that credit reporting agencies will receive reports from landlords when tenants fail to pay rent. And that oftentimes creates long-term credit history problems for tenants and their availability to get credit, potentially to purchase a car, to purchase a home. That's having sort of negative consequences. Representative Crossley's bill looks at the other end and really allows tenants to require landlords to report positive credit events. So primarily what we're talking about is if a tenant can get dinged for not paying rent, but there's no mechanism for getting positive credit reports when they do pay rent consistently. So this bill would allow tenants to request that landlords report to credit reporting agencies that they have consistently paid their rent on time to allow them to build up credit as tenants. So that will be an interesting bill to follow as well. That's it for the housing bills. I'm going to turn it over to Rika White to talk about our community justice priorities.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining me. I am one of two criminal justice policy managers. My colleague Gwen I'm subbing in for her, but you all will learn about our priorities this upcoming session. So thank you for being here. Clean Slate is one of them, so close the gap for Clean Slate. This is 4 years of bipartisan momentum. It continues to gain strong support across party lines, and Clean Slate basically will automate expungement. So there's currently less than 1% of eligible Missourians that can access the petition-based process. That's simply very complicated, it's costly, and Clean Slate legislation will help close that gap. Currently, there's over 1.9 million here in Missouri alone that face that barrier daily, and Clean Slate would allow a second chance for housing, employment, education, and opportunities. I'm pretty sure all of us have known people that have the reality of going to apply for a new home and getting turned away, or doing an amazing job on an interview and them looking into your resume and application and seeing the record and being turned down and just overall being looked at like you are nothing. That's not a good feeling. There was major progress last session with Clean Slate with HB, which is the House Bill 953 from Representative Davidson. It reached the House floor and was even perfected. That was the furthest a Clean Slate bill has ever advanced here in Missouri. This is 4 years of bipartisan momentum, and it's continuing to gain that support across the party line. So we are really eager to have that momentum again this year for this upcoming session. So a couple of bills that we are watching so far are Senate Bill 854 from Senator Williams and House Bill 2047 from Representative Terry. Both of those will establish provisions related to expungement. And Just overall, for people to come back to us, they have to have access to good housing and good employment. So Clean Slate doesn't automatically fix that immediately, but it does help create a pathway for it. And this is a workforce development issue, and we are so thankful to all of our businesses that partner with us to make sure Missouri knows that they want Clean Slate too. And like I said, there's national momentum right now. Clean Slate is already law in 13 states. Illinois just passed it as state number 13, and Missouri can become the 14th one. So I'm encouraging all of you all to join our Clean Slate campaign. There will be a link in the chat where you can sign on as an individual, you can sign on as a business, you can sign on as an organization, and we will really push hard this upcoming session to get this through the finish line because I think it can definitely be possible for Missouri. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the Department of Corrections oversight so far, our House Bill 1616 from Representative Allen, which establishes the Independent Office of Correction and Transparency for the Department of Corrections. Oversight is simply this. It's independent monitoring that helps reduce harms and improve conditions for residents as well as staff. It also restores trust and transparency and strengthens the public confidence in the Department of Corrections. Simply, families deserve accurate information and assurance that their loved ones are treated fairly and safely. It also supports the staff. It helps with identifying systemic issues like staff shortages and workplace safety concerns. This is a response to a longstanding call from advocates, residents, families, and staff, like I said before. Over 87 million has been paid out in lawsuits right now currently against the Missouri Department of Corrections. I'll say over 87 million and counting because there's well more than that. Fortunately, across the state in our 19 facilities, we see so many just different horrible and horrendous stories about issues that are happening to the staff and the residents inside of the facilities. And it just helps, like I said, demonstrate the systemic issues and the costly outcomes that come from that, whether it's, workplace harassment or it's in custody deaths or it's, medical neglect. All of those things are happening in these 19 facilities. And so this will help address lack of transparency around serious incidents. And then it creates the pathways for meaningful accountability with the Department of Corrections. And so I do encourage people to join our oversight working group. And yeah, there will be more to come. I know there's going to be a couple more bills that are coming. This is just pre-filed right now. And thank you, Latrell, 87 million in taxpayers' monies. So there is, this is money that we are paying out to the Missouri Department of Corrections for their, lack thereof. So we really hope you all can join that campaign as well. Next slide. And as we begin to talk about parole reform, I just want to emphasize that it's important to remember that people are more than the worst thing that they've ever done. Parole reform is not automatic release. It's about meaningful review and individualized decision making. Over time, people grow, mature, and change. A fair parole system simply allows us to assess who someone is today and while keeping the public safety at a center. At its core, parole reform is about balance, accountability, and second chances, safety and humanity, justice that recognizes growth. Parole reform is necessary to create early release pathways for those at lowest risk of reoffending, including older adults and individuals whose offense was committed at a young age. Missouri's prison population is aging rapidly. As of 2024, we have data that shows well over 24% of the more 24% of the more than 23,000 incarcerated individuals under Missouri's charge are over age 50. So there are several different legislative avenues for improving parole eligibility. I'll break down a couple of them. The compassionate release is one of them. It's focused on elderly or sick incarcerated individuals. Earned time policies are focused on earlier parole eligibility for completion of educational and restorative justice programs. The good time policies have earlier parole eligibility for the time completed without any behavior misconduct and then the emerging adults bills, which are resentencing for individuals who were under a certain age at the time of their offense. So multiple bills have been pre-filed that will help expand these, and I'll break down a couple of these, starting with House Bill 1620 from Representative Sassman. This is a bill to include 19-year-olds in the second look sentencing after serving 25 years. So basically, that expands the eligibility. It includes individuals who were 19 years old at the time of the offense and allows review after 25 years served. This recognizes that young adults are still developing and deserve a second chance at review. Second, with House Bill 2322 with Representative Lucas, it would end life sentences for those under 20 at the time of offense, both retroactively and going forward. It applies prospectively also and aligns sentencing with modern understanding of youth and accountability. So we are looking at that one as well. Senate Bill 1335 and Senate Bill 1226 from both Senator Washington and Senator Roberts both create parole eligibility for people 65 and older. And for Washington's bill, it excludes first-degree murder, but it focuses on aging prison populations that I talked about earlier and public safety. As far as Senator Roberts' bill, it helps establish parole eligibility beginning at age 60, and it includes multiple caveats. So expands review opportunities while maintaining exclusion and just overall different things. And yes, it is very good that it's retroactive. Thank you. And lastly, well, not lastly, but Senate Bill 1215 also for Senator Nurabin addresses parole and also good time reforms. It also aims to increase meaningful release mechanisms. And it's a part of a broader Senate Democratic reform efforts. So all three of those from our Senate Dems are something that we will be looking at this upcoming session. Our Survivors Justice Bill, House Bill 1872 from Representative Reuter, would allow for the judicial resentencing for individuals whose offenses stemmed from abuse. These alone allows, like I said, judicial resentencing, but applies when an offense was directly connected to abuse or coercion. It centers survivors of domestic and sexual violence, so that's really good, and it gives judges discretion to reassess sentencing with full context. And next slide, please. Fighting truth in sentencing. Truth in sentencing laws require incarcerated people to serve more of their sentences with less opportunity to earn earlier release through good time credits or parole, removing incentives for those individuals to better themselves behind bars. This legislation moves us backwards and addresses a problem that does not exist. People are staying in Missouri prisons longer than they were in previous years. There are DOC data clearly shows that the average amount of time incarcerated individuals spent between fiscal year 2018 and fiscal year 2023. So that's not good. A couple of bills that we are watching currently right now that have been pre-filed is Senate Bill 1074 from Senator Hudson. This eliminates earned compliance and good time credits for parole on probation or for people on probation and parole, and it removes incentives for successful reentry and supervision compliance. Representative Hovis' bill is it was refiled legislation from last year. This massively expands mandatory minimum prison term structures, and it also further limits judicial discretion and sentence flexibility. That's House Bill 2020-56. And like I said, this was refiled legislation. Last year, the fiscal note from Rep. Hovis' bill estimated at a cost of $279 million once fully implemented. I'm going to say that again, $279 million once fully implemented. That is actually insane. And that is even more concerning that the fiscal note explicitly stated that a new prison would likely need to be built. And the cost of constructing that facility was not included in the $279 million estimate. So the true cost of this legislation will be significantly higher and placing a huge burden on taxpayers without actually knowledge of improving public safety. And so that is another bill that we are watching. Lastly, well, not lastly, but next slide, please. There's a couple other bills that we are watching that I'll dive deep into. Um, Capital cases, there's two bills which will close the judicial loophole, which is Senate Bill 1186 from Senator Coleman, and then House Bill 2141 from Representative Davis. Like I said, it would close the judicial loophole in capital cases. The judicial loophole lets judges basically make some death penalty decisions, and these bills aim to close it for more consistent sentencing. There's multiple crimmigration bills that is happening right now. Basically on different things about our undocumented community members. We are working closely with our immigration organizations that are working on those efforts to support and be led by them. But a couple that we have reached out and dived deep into is Senate Bill 1265 from Senator Braden, Senate Bill 1070 from Senator Gregory, and House Bill 2134 from Representative Titus. These are part of an ongoing effort to increase the role of the criminal legal system in immigration enforcement, particularly related to the deportation and undocumented individuals. That's ramping up here in Missouri, and it's very concerning to see that happening. And then also a pre-charge detention bill from House Bill 2310 from Representative Jones basically would extend the amount of time a person can be held after arrest without formally being charged, increasing the limit from 24 hours up to 72 hours. And that is House Bill 2310. So that is another one that we keep our eyes on. If any of these have showed interest to you or you want to dive deeper into the campaign, myself and my colleague Gwen are our two criminal justice policy managers, and we encourage you all to connect with us. I'll drop my email in the chat, but also in the chat, we will have our Community Justice Coalition call. We meet once a month, two times during legislation. Thank you, Erica, for dropping that in the call, in the chat. And so I encourage all of you all to sign up because this is a big fight that we're going to need all hands on deck for this upcoming legislative session. There's currently over 1,500 bills that have been pre-filed. I think in our community justice bills alone, we're reaching close to the 200 mark. A lot of them are opposition, but there are a couple good ones. So we do really need more people involved. So I will just encourage you all to sign up and join our coalition. Also in the chat, there should be a community justice coalition tracker where it kind of went over some of these priority bills that I named, like oversight, clean slate, parole eligibility, mandatory minimums, different things like that. And I will turn it back over to Lucas. Thank you all.
All right, great. Thanks, Rika. Before I turn a little bit to some advocacy opportunities, we have a few minutes. I just want to both turn to the other speakers and open it up for a couple of questions from participants or speakers. If you saw a question in the chat that either you wanted to amplify out to the whole group, feel free to come off mute. So I'll pause here to see if anyone has any questions. And you can put them in the chat, or of course, if you'd like to come off mute, you can do that as well.
I see a comment from Annie Rice from Art City. I would just like you to kind of talk a little bit about that comment about truth and sentencing, if mine. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no problem, Rika. Hi. I just saw, I believe it was an article in it was either the Post-Dispatch or St. Louis Public Radio, maybe the St. Louis Magazine yesterday. There was an interview with Catherine Hanaway, and she said that that was one of her priorities this year was truth and sentencing. And so if, it's one thing for the legislators to file things on their own, it's another to throw the AG's weight behind it. So that's definitely concerning on that front. And it wasn't, that was the only blurb about it. So that's all I know.
Thank you for that.
On the housing, and I'll just raise up, we had some chat, thanks, V Sanchez, our affordable housing policy manager, jumped into around the use of Missouri Housing Trust Fund's support for folks returning to communities from prison and jail. I wanted to raise that. I think it's a great use in a particular population that faces unique housing threats, so and housing barriers. And also shout out that more to come on that subject from Empower Missouri. Rika and Erica will both be sending out some more news about reconstituting a working group exactly focused on barriers to housing for formerly incarcerated individuals. And so more to come from Empower Missouri on that as well.
I see, Latrell, I see your comment about Senate Bill 888 from Schroer about the modified provisions relating to juvenile justice systems. That is one that we are tracking for our youth justice. Gwen is leading that, and it actually has been discussed in the Youth Justice Working Group, but it basically presents evidence that a child between the ages of 14 have committed an offense that would be considered a felony if an adult in that case should be transferred from the juvenile court to the court of general jurisdiction. So yes, that is actually one that we are tracking, and Gwen is on that one. So thank you for lifting that one up. There's a hand raised from Felicia Hampton.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. A question. I got a chance to speak to a couple of inmates with the NAACP, and they were saying, share with me that they have Armed Criminal Act as a charge, and they received like 30 years at the time when they committed the offense. And now that there's a new bill that passed that you get 3 to 10 years with the Armed Criminal Act. Is there anyone working on grandfathering those type of cases into something where they could receive less time versus having to carry out a 25, 30-year sentence? Like there was no limit on it during the time when they got their case.
Dr. Hampton, I'll let Rika chime in too. It sounds like, to the point that I think was raised in the chat too, it sounds a little bit like the retroactivity issue. In other words, that if they had been charged, under current law, they would have a much shorter sentence, but since they were charged previously, they're having a longer sentence. I don't know of any bills filed or whether that particular bill was retroactive. Rika highlighted that at least one of the bills filed would apply retroactively. It sounds like maybe that wasn't the case for the legislation you're talking about. Rika, do you have any other details or thoughts on that question? We might just have to get back to you more on that too, Dr. Hampton.
Yeah, Dr. Felicia, I would just like to connect. There's a deeper conversation that we can have with that, but I'll put my email in the chat, and we can talk offline about that. Thank you for lifting that up.
And I said there's a lot of bills left on the cutting room floor for community justice. I think our tracker that's linked in there is over 100 bills filed. It's obviously a very active part of the legislative session, or at least the pre-filing portion of the legislative session. So there are lots more bills that we can't cover in detail today, but we certainly are tracking them, and our coalition's tracking them as well. So both of those are good resources for future information about community justice focused bills. Just checking the chat. Okay, let's talk about what's next. So, we went over some very high level overview of the legislative session. If you want a refresher on how the budget, how the state budget works, how can you influence policy in the legislative session, how to get in touch with lawmakers, all of those sort of important parts of advocating in Jefferson City, we have a back to session boot camp run by our excellent Director of Advocacy, Sarah Owsley. It's 3 sessions similar to last year, with a bonus session focused on fast democracy. Many of our links, we rely on fast democracy to track legislation. It's a good way to find out what's been filed, what's happening with a piece of legislation. That is that first full week of January, and you can register at the link that Erica just added to the chat. I will say that, the folks who oftentimes show up for these, and I appreciate you all being here, you're oftentimes the experts in your organization, in your community, in your network of friends. So even if maybe you don't need necessarily the back to session boot camp, I encourage you to share it with as many people as possible. The question in the chat, it's open to everyone, free and open to everyone in the public. We need as many people as possible to have the nuts and bolts of how to advocate in Jefferson City. So that's great. Yeah, please send it to your internal group, your external group, your Facebook, friends, relatives. That's what it's going to take to get a lot of these legislation that we want passed to actually pass this session, and to fight back against some of these bad ideas that are built into these bills as well. So sign up and share with friends and colleagues, and look forward to seeing a lot of you there as well. Our first real organized legislative advocacy is our virtual week of action. That's the first week of February, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. I encourage you all to join us then, to register using the link in the chat. And we will take just about an hour over the noon hour on each of those days to do some issue education, learn about, dive deep into one issue, and then take action collectively together. So reach out to lawmakers, amplify it on social media. Each of the issue areas will have a particular focus on what they want to do. It might be, encouraging clean slate to be passed and reaching out to lawmakers. But we'll do that in community virtually during that week of action, February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So I encourage you all to share that as well and see you there. And then the last event I'll talk about today is our Day of Action, and that is in person in Jefferson City. And it's one day where we all show up to make sure there is at least one day in the legislative session where lawmakers understand how important it is to focus on policies that work to end poverty, that work to create more justice, more access to food and housing. And so that's February 17th at the Capitol. I really encourage you all to come and bring a friend. The more of us there, the more powerful we are, and the harder it is to ignore. And we want folks in Jefferson City and policymakers to know that we're watching and advocating for these positive bills and fighting against some of these bad ideas that are in these bills that we talked about today. You'll get a chance to come with Empower Missouri staff to meet with your representative, your senators and representatives in your areas, attend hearings. Lunch is provided. We'll do an opening rally. We'll get to hear our voices echo in the rotunda. And so we're hoping for good weather on February 17th. Even if it's bad weather, we want as many people to come as possible. So register at the link, and we'll see you in Jefferson City on February 17th for our Day of Action. That about wraps us up for the day. Please follow us on social media, where we'll amplify a lot of these calls to action during the legislative session. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Some of our policy managers have put our emails in the chat. If you don't know who to reach out, send us an email at info@empowermissouri.org. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Very informational.
Happy holidays, everyone.